Hello, I'm back, and this is a video titled, No, Nintendo is not like Sega, and here's why. Now, the important thing to realize is that you'll hear quite a few people in this community, or in the video gaming community at large, not Nintendo gamers, but video gaming community at large, and quite a few developers, assholes, who will say that Nintendo needs to pull a Sega. Here's why this is never going to happen. Sega did not fail because of the Dreamcast. Sega failed for, well, everything before the Dreamcast. Sega failed for primarily three reasons that led to a triumvirate of just extreme failure, okay? First of all, Sega of America's president had way too much say in what was going to be localized and released in America. And that led to a series of extreme problems, okay? Basically, none of the three, which leads me to the second problem that Sega had in America. Before the Dreamcast came out, Sega added a series of add-ons which were designed to expand its basic console at that time, the Sega Genesis, into what some would call a new console. They treated these add-ons as new consoles. So first it was the 32X, which wasn't really 32 bits at all, but we'll let them slide on that false marketing. The Sega CD, which was an add-on to the Sega Genesis as well, and finally the Sega Saturn. Now, all three of these systems, well, two of them were add-ons to the Sega Genesis. The Sega Saturn was its own system, but I believe at some point you could get it where it was like part of the Sega Genesis, like you put a cartridge in, then the Sega Saturn. It was, needless to say, very annoying. Now, the important thing to realize is that this didn't work out for Sega at all. This was not very useful, and it didn't really help them in their overarching goals. Now, this leads to the third issue that we had, okay? Sega's IPs at this time began to suffer dramatically, okay? Sonic the Hedgehog had run its course. And I know some people are going to say, well, they had Sonic CD. Sonic CD wasn't a bad game. Was it as good as Sonic the Hedgehog 1, 2, 3 or Sonic and Knuckles? No, it was not. I believe the reason this happened was because a lot of the talent began to leave Sega at this point, or they were being muzzled, and those who were left were being muzzled. But basically, this was a trifecta, okay? Now, if you add in the fact that in order to produce those three consoles, Sega was bleeding money, because it always is expensive to produce a console. The consoles are almost always initially being sold at a loss, and Sega was constantly saying, oh, well, this isn't the console that you need, and throwing this away. This isn't the console that you need, and throwing this one away. Basically, they lost a lot of consumer confidence in the product, okay? And because they didn't have confidence in the product. And consumers felt this. It's the reason why when you hear people say Nintendo needs to drop the Wii U and just move on. No. The only time you drop a product entirely is if it's a complete and total and abject failure. The Virtual Boy, the PSP Go, which was dropped like after a year and a half, 2 years. I mean, it was a joke. The Vita, which desperately needs to be dropped by Sony. And I don't care what anyone tells you, the Vita needs to be dropped, okay? And, it was not very smart. It was not very smart of Sony it was not very smart of Sega to do this, but they did it anyway. Anyway, these three things led to, Sega not being in a very good condition, okay, for X amount of years, okay? Now, after this happened, we were led to, they released the Dreamcast, and the Dreamcast was a awesome system, okay? I own a Dreamcast. I have not a huge collection of games, but a good collection of great games like Seaman, Shinmu 1 and 2, Power Stone 1 and 2, let's see, what else? Crazy Taxi 1 and 2. Let's see, what else? I don't have Skies of Arcadia for that game. I wanted to get it, but it was too expensive, so I just got it on my GameCube. Phantasy Star Online, Parts 1 and 2, Panzer Dragoon, Grandia. No sports games, because I'm not a big sports game fan, unless it's NBA Jam, or Mutant League, or Blitz. But anyway, basically, Sega had a decent amount of games, but ultimately, it was too late by that point, because it sold all those other 3 add-ons that I told you about, the 32X, the CD, and the Dragon, and the Sega Saturn, were all sold at a loss, so they were in a deep hole at that point. Plus the Dreamcast, which not only was being sold at a loss, but it had components from other technology companies, which meant for every Sega Sega Dreamcast that they sold had to be sold. They had to give royalties to other companies. This is part and parcel of why the reason Nintendo uses what they like to term withered technology. They use older technology that either the royalties for they have to pay for it are very slim, or they don't have to pay any royalties at all because it's old stuff. The patent has run out. Now, Sega did this. By the time the Dreamcast came along, which was the last of a string, which was, several years of bad moves with one right move, it was too late, and Sega was over. Now, to contrast this to Nintendo initially sells all their consoles at a loss. Every console manufacturer does, and don't believe the hype that you hear from various websites where they say, well, this thing takes $393 to make, this console takes $485 to make. Every console is being sold at a loss, okay? It's being sold at a loss initially. But Nintendo, because they use older technology, they tend to find better and more efficient ways to make the console as time goes on. By this time next year, every Wii U being sold will be sold at a profit. Plus, their games will be sold at a profit, because Nintendo budgets very well for their games. Okay, they budget extraordinarily well for their games. For example, Super Mario 3D World is a damn good game. You know how many gigabytes it is? 1.7 to download. And I know this because I downloaded it on my Wii U. I wasn't going to wait in line and worry about physical copies. I just downloaded it on my Wii U. 1.7 gigabytes downloaded in like 5-6 minutes. Okay? Now, so Nintendo doesn't sell their consoles for a loss for long. They use older technology, they budget well, and they have a stable of high-quality IPs that they know will sell. Mario 3D World is going to sell this Christmas, and it will continue to sell either downloaded or physical copies or bundled for a very long time. Sega didn't have that. Sega's never had that. I mean, to wrap this up, basically think of it like this. Remember when we were kids and it was Sega versus Nintendo? Well, let me put it this way. Mario ain't in Sonic's games, but Sonic is in Mario's games. So who's the bitch? So yeah, this is just a little bit of information for you guys. Just a little bit of news before I sign off. I'm having a live event tomorrow at starting at 7, or maybe 6:30, whatever. Starting at 7, maybe 6:30, going to 8:30, where I'll be watching the live stream and commenting on it. If you watch it along with me, we can have some fun. Don't forget to tune in. It's on my channel, so subscribe or just wait for it. It'll be on there. And you guys have a good day.